Hey, what's up everyone? John here with Web Dev for You, here to help you build awesome websites without code in Webflow. Today we're going to go over interaction number 160, which is a Lightbox button animation on hover. So here when I hover over this button, we can see that it scales, and when I hover over this watch text, the text turns white. So this white dot, we're going to create a mouse hover animation, and when we hover over the button, it turns black, and when we hover over the text changes color. This is done with a blend mode effect in Webflow, and it's quite simple. So we'll go over that, creating this blend mode effect, and we'll go over creating this kind of scaling button animation with the changing text. And it is a Lightbox button, so when you click on it, it does show a video. So just a little effect I thought was kind of neat. It was inspired by this website here, nulltime.com, where they have this button right over here. And when you hover, it does kind of that similar effect where the text changes and the background of the button changes to white. And when you hover over the text color changes to kind of have that difference between the black and white. All right, so this is what we will be building today. So let's go ahead and get started. So here I'll click on a blank project. I have a blank project in Webflow, and I'll just start with a section. And I'll call this 160 section. We'll set the minimum height to 100 VH, and we'll set the flex setting to center and center. Then in here, we'll add a Lightbox element, and we'll delete the image inside of it. We'll select the Lightbox link, and I'll say 160 button wrapper. Okay, and then I'll set the width and height to 150 by 150 and the border radius to 50%, okay, because I want it to be a perfect circle. And let me go ahead and set the background color of the section to a blackish color. Not completely black, but 1A, 1A, 1A. So we're gonna add a white button initially, or a button with a white border. Okay, so we have the 160 button wrapper. We set it to 150 by 150. And we also want to set the position to relative because we're going to add an absolute position div in here. And we want to set the flex setting to flex and center, center. And in here, I'm going to add another div block, and I'm going to call this 160 button background. So this is the button that's going to scale. So I'm just going to set it to a position of absolute and full, so it fills the entire parent element. I'm going to give it a border radius of 50% as well, and set the border here, and then I'll set the border to white, so it has a white border. Okay, and we do want the background to be transparent initially, and there we go. So we have the outline of the button, and now I'm going to go ahead and add in the button wrapper, I'm going to add a div block, and I'm going to call this 160 text wrapper. Okay, and in here is where I'm going to add the text. So I'm going to add a text block. Actually, before we do that, for the text wrapper, let's set the position to relative because we're going to add an absolute position div in here. And I'll go ahead and add a text block in here, and we'll call this text block 160-first text. And then let's go ahead and back to the button wrapper, and let's go to the typography settings and remove the underline by selecting this X here. And then we'll click on the first text here, and we'll change the color to, for this first text, we want it to be white. And I'll select the text DM sans for the text. We'll make the size 22 and the line height 1 so it's basically like 100%. And the letter spacing, we'll leave it at the way it is. And I'll just type in watch here for the button. And I actually think this is a watch website, so I'm not sure if this is, if I click watch, yeah, it goes to a watch. So it's interesting, it's not really a video, but it kind of still works for a video. So that's interesting. All right, so we have the first text. It's all styled, so I'm going to hit Command C and Command V to copy, so we have two on top of each other. Then for the second text, I'm going to duplicate the class and call this 160 second text. Okay, I'm going to set the position to absolute and full, So it's going to be on top of that black text or the white text, and then I'm going to change the color to black here, or we'll do the same color as that background. Okay, so that's all we had to do there for the second text, and now we want to add a little dot in the center of the section. So I'm going to add a div block, and this is the dot that's going to be following the mouse cursor. So I'm going to say 160 mouse circle. I'm going to give it a width and height of 10 by 10 pixels. I'm going to set the border radius to 50%, so it's a perfect circle. Set the background color to white, and we are going to, let's see, set the position to absolute, so it goes in the center of the section, because the section has a flex setting of center. And we also want the blend mode for the circle to be difference, and this will change the color to black anytime it hovers over a white element. Okay, so we can't see it yet, but we do want that blend mode to be difference here. We'll see it in a second. Okay, so the next thing we want to do, the first animation, is moving the dot with the mouse. So to do that, we just want to go to interactions. Under page trigger, click the plus, then select mouse move in viewport, and then on mouse move, we're going to play a mouse animation, click the plus, and we'll say 160 mouse move in viewport. Okay, and then on the X, we're going to move it on the X -50 VW, so viewport width -50, and then when we move to the right, we're going to move it 50 VW to the right, and on the Y, we're going to move it -50 VH when we move the mouse up, and 50 VH when we move the mouse down. I'll click save, and if we preview, we can see that dot follows the mouse, which is great. And now we just want to add some smoothing, maybe like 70%, so the dot lags a little bit with the mouse. And you can kind of change that. You can do even 80% depending on what you're going for the smoothing. And I kind of like 80%, it's really smooth. Okay, so now what we want to do is apply the animation to the button wrapper right here. So we want to select it. So when we hover, essentially we want to scale the background up, and we want to move the text up, and I think that's about it. Yeah. So let's go select the button wrapper. We'll go to interactions. I'll click the plus. I'll say mouse hover, and on hover, we'll start an animation. I'll click the plus here, and we'll call this 160 button hover in. And we will, let's see. So for the second text, let's move it down 100%. And we're going to set it as the initial state, so we don't see it initially. And we're going to set the opacity to 0%, so we don't see it initially either. Okay? And then the first thing we want to do is move the watch text, or the first text. We're going to move it up -100%. And then the second text, we're going to move it up to 0%. Okay, and we'll start it together. So I'll click, hold, and drag. So the first text and the second text, they start together. And then we also want to, for the first text, we also want to set the opacity to 0%. And the second text, we want to set the opacity back to 100%, so it's visible. Okay, so we move the first text up -100%, set the opacity to 0. The second text, we move it up back to 0% because we had it initially at 100%. So we moved it back up to 0% and set the opacity to 100%. Because the opacity was initially 0%. So if I preview, we won't be able to see it because we have to change the background color of the button background. So let's select it here, and let's change the background color to white, and we'll start it with the other ones. And we also want to scale it, let's say 1.3, and we'll start it with the other ones here. So I'll select all of these, and we'll change the duration to 0.2, and set the easing to ease. So now when I hover, we have that effect. Perfect. Okay, so now I'll click save, and then on hover out, we'll start an animation. I'll duplicate this one, and I'll say 160 button, hover out. I'll delete these initial states, and then I'll just reverse everything here. So for the movement of the first text, we're going to move it back to 0%. The second text, we're going to move it back down to 100%. The first text opacity, we're going to say 100%. The second text opacity, we're going to say 0%. The button background color, we're going to set it back to transparent. You can just drag this slider here to transparent. And then the scale, we're going to set it back to 1. All right, so when I hover, we should have that effect. Let's see. So button wrapper, let me click save. There we go. Okay, cool. All right. So now we just have to do something because the animation is a little bit glitchy, and that's because this dot is interfering with the hover animation. So what we need to do is I'll add an embed element, and we need to select the mouse circle. So I'll do _160 mouse circle, and we need to put in style tag. So I'll start with the style tag, and then I'll close the style tag here, and then we'll say 160 mouse circle pointer events, set it to none, and that's it. So now the pointer events for the mouse circle won't be detected, and it won't interfere with hovering over the button. Okay. All right, so there's one last thing we need to do, and that's to scale this little dot here when we hover over watch. And that's fairly simple. We can just select the text wrapper, click the plus. I'll say on mouse hover, we'll start an animation, and I'll click the plus, and I'll say 160 text wrapper hover in, and we'll select the mouse circle, click the plus, say scale, and we'll scale it to, let's say, 2.5 or 2.8. Let's make it a little bit larger. And that's it. And let's say ease for the scaling, click save, and on hover out, we'll start an animation. I'll duplicate this, select it, and we'll say text wrapper hover out, and I'll scale it back to 1. And 5 seconds is okay, so it has a bit of a smoother kind of fade in. And we don't want to scale it actually, so let's undo that. I'm gonna delete this. Let's go to the hover in. Let's change the size. When we scale it, the circle loses a bit of its quality, so we want to change the size. So I'll select size, and we'll set it to 30 by 30 pixels, and set the easing to ease. Click save. Again, we'll duplicate this, and I'll select text wrapper hover out, and we'll set the width and height to 10 by 10. So that's what it was initially at. Okay, there we go. Looks good. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is grab a video. So let me grab a video on YouTube here. And I think I have it here. So we can just select the Lightbox button, go to element settings, add a video, and I'll paste that in here. Click save. Now when we hover, we have that nice animation. And when I click, the video plays. Okay, the last thing to do is to publish the site and view it in the browser. All right, looks good. So that effect is just done by, the text changing to white. That's all done by setting the blend mode of the mouse circle to difference. So when it hovers over a white color, it turns to black, and when it hovers over black text, the button turns black and the text turns white. So it just has a difference in color there. All right, I think that's a fun little button. This project is clonable for free in the description area below. You can just click on that link and clone it into your own project. You can copy and paste this button wrapper. It'll copy and paste the interaction along with it, and you can use this button in your own website. You can then change the text for both of these to match your site. You can change the color. The difference will just look a little bit different depending on the colors that are chosen. All right, so that is it for this video tutorial. Again, feel free to sign up with Webflow in the links below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video tutorial. Thank you.